Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to hear such a buzz in the NIBS auditorium as we have even more people filtering in. So thank you all for joining us today. A very exciting day for the ABS, but indeed for the public service in general, where we're announcing the launch of the Occupation Standard Classification for Australia, or as it's already affectionately being known, OSCA. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Phillip Gould, so I'm the new deputy here at the ABS. I'm responsible for the Data and Statistical Practices Group. I'm into my third month here and my second stint at the ABS, and it's wonderful to have an opportunity to launch OSCA, something that I didn't have a particular role in doing all of the hard work, so I get to come in at the end and do the fun piece. We have a range of guests with us today, so we're very grateful for people coming along. Firstly, I'd like to welcome the Responsible Minister for the ABS, Dr. Andrew Leigh, the Honourable Dr. Andrew Leigh. He is the Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities and Treasury, and it says here in very large font, I think sort of 25-point font, the Assistant Minister for Employment as well, which I think is very relevant for the discussion that we are having today. We also have Dr. Gruen, the Australian statistician, with us. We have Fan Xiang, who is an acting Assistant Secretary of the National Skills System branch, Jobs and Skills Australia. We also have Megan Leigh, who I've worked with before, and nice to see you again, Megan, who is the First Assistant Secretary for the Office of Women. And finally, we have Majella Fitzsimmons, who's the President of the Australian Childcare Alliance Queensland branch. Welcome, thank you for being here. I'd also like to extend my welcome to all of the people here in the room today. It's fantastic, as I said, we have more people here in the NIBS auditorium than I've seen for quite a while, but also all of the people online. Before we begin the rest of the presentations, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we're all meeting on today and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I think it's a really nice opportunity as well to say that the work that's been done with OSCA helps us create better classifications of occupations for Indigenous Australians. So I think that's an important acknowledgement to make at this point. With that said, I'd like to welcome Dr. Gruen to the stage to talk for a while. David.
Thanks very much, Phillip, and it is indeed nice to see NIBS almost full. I don't think I've seen this many people in NIBS since COVID, so it's very nice for an occasion like this to have an almost full house, and of course lots of people joining us online as well. In 2022, the Australian government announced $23.7 million of funding over 4 years for the ABS to undertake a comprehensive review of the Australian and New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations, or ANZSCO, and to begin a maintenance program starting next year. The update to the classification has, as you would expect, been a huge undertaking and a coordinated effort across many teams over the past 2 years. The formal consultation period for the review spanned over 200 days. Over 2,000 groups and individuals and entities participated, with over 800 submissions from across the Commonwealth and state government and private industry. And over 1,000 occupations were reviewed. As a result, over 300 new occupations have been created and 250 have been retired to reflect the modern Australian labour market. Key benefits include updated occupations and, as Phillip mentioned, improved coverage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander occupations, and the removal of gendered language, men's and women's, where it was superfluous. You don't need to say women's dressmaker, male tailor, if you don't need to. On the 8th of October, we jointly announced with Stats New Zealand that while maintaining comparability, each country will introduce their own tailored occupational statistical classification. ANZSCO was established in 2006, and the labour markets in the two countries have changed substantially over that time, and the differences are now greater than they were when the joint management of the occupation classification made sense. So this was a joint decision between ourselves and Stats New Zealand that it made sense for us to have comparable classifications but to go our own ways. So for Australia, as you've heard, and as I'm sure everybody in the room knows, the new classification will be known as the Occupation Standard Classification for Australia, or OSCA. To all those who've contributed to the review over the past 2 years, thank you for your hard work and determination. This has been an enormous effort. The review of ANZSCO was made possible, as I said at the beginning, by the Australian government's significant investment. The investment was made to update a nationally important classification with a wide range of uses and to harness the power of machine learning coding capability. So, these are some of the benefits. It will reduce coding costs for the 2026 census. It will provide a coding service to other agencies to assist their transition to the use of the updated classification. And it will allow the ABS to investigate other uses of data science, including AI, to improve the efficiency of the maintenance of national statistical infrastructure, including OSCA. The release of OSCA today provides an example of the ABS's commitment to producing high quality and relevant statistics to meet the needs of government, businesses and the community. I would like to acknowledge the contributions of those who spent time providing submissions, met with us and shared information through their networks over the course of the past 2 years, the ANZSCO Project Board for monitoring and assuring the delivery of the project and supporting key decisions over the course of the project, members of the Implementation Steering Group who have provided advice and support in delivery of OSCA, and the ABS looks forward to continuing to work with agencies as they transition from the use of ANZSCO to OSCA, and where appropriate, make use of the whole of Australian Government Coding Capability Service. External and internal members of the Business Acceptance Testing Panel who provided independent quality assurances of the changes made to the classification, past and present members of the ANZSCO project team for their contributions and achievements, as well as our corporate communications area for their support and sharing their expertise. The review of ANZSCO has involved considerable innovation. The use of generative AI and comprehensive engagement and communication strategies have created efficiencies in our processes and enhanced the quality of the final product. The update required the creation of a unique set of tasks for each occupation. Creating this task list would have been quite time-consuming if done manually. Instead, the team used generative AI to create a preliminary set of tasks for human review. The use of AI saved an estimated 1,600 hours of analysts' time over the course of the review. Our use of AI in this project has attracted international attention. It was included as a case study in a United Nations white paper on the use of generative AI in national statistical organisations. And we also have our minister to thank for putting it in one of his speeches. The use of AI in the review was nominated for a 2024 Australian Public Service Data Award in the Innovative, Ethical and Responsible Use of Artificial Intelligence category. The project was one of the 3 finalists, though the competition was stiff and ultimately it didn't take home the prize. Transparency and inclusivity were pillars of our engagement and communication strategies. Interested parties were provided regular updates and had the opportunity to contribute, improving the acceptance of the update. Productive relationships have increased trust and confidence in OSCA and enhanced the ABS's reputation as proactive, outwardly focused and collaborative, which are all things we seek to be. Strategic communication campaigns were essential in raising awareness about the review and encouraging participation. Using a range of channels, including social media, newsletters and the ABS website, these campaigns reached a wide audience and improved engagement. Throughout the project, communication campaigns were carried out using a range of internal and external channels. One innovation as well as the use of AI, was to undertake some paid social media advertising to generate awareness of the consultation rounds with industry-specific audiences via LinkedIn and Meta. Historically, the ABS has made limited use of paid social media, primarily using it for census campaigns through a public relations agency. This project provided an opportunity to explore the effectiveness of targeted social media advertising on a small scale. It showed promise for future applications. It was cost-effective and improved reach across those groups who needed to know. So let me end by thanking the guest speakers from Jobs and Skills Australia, the Office for Women and the Australian Childcare Alliance for attending today and being willing to support this launch. And now let me invite the Honourable Dr Andrew Leigh, the Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities and Treasury and Assistant Minister for Employment, to say a few words and to launch OSCA.
Well, thanks very much, David, and welcome to the most statistically literate Oscars ceremony that you will ever hear about. It's my pleasure to join you on Ngunnawal land, Daranuna, Daranunawal, Yungu, Nalamanyan, Dunimanyan, Ngunnawalwari, Darawari, Dindi, Wangaralin, Jinyin. I want to acknowledge all First Nations people present to say how much I appreciate the work that the ABS does towards closing the gaps. It's a rare event where I get to put on my I Love Evidence badge, so thank you for giving me an excuse to do that today. Thank you too to the extraordinary David Gruen. Congratulations on your reappointment for another 5-year term, David. Phillip Gould, AJ Lanyon, Fan Xiang, Leigh, and Majella Fitzsimmons for bringing together the contributions that you bring to today's conversation. This is an exciting moment to be launching a new occupational classification system. It's a process that, as the Chief Statistician has said, has been going for the past 2 years. And it's brought together the best of the ABS's human engagement and data usage. The consultation process spanned 200 days, involved over 2,000 stakeholders, 800 submissions, and carefully built in that outside advice. At the very same time, the ABS was using artificial intelligence to look at how to better construct task descriptions. Not artificial intelligence sent off on its own, but artificial intelligence carefully reviewed by humans. Those ChatGPT descriptions produced a draft set of task descriptions for each occupation, delivering a 7-fold return on investment. The other big change with OSCA is the separation of New Zealand occupations from the Australian occupational coding. This is, as Gwyneth Paltrow might have put it, a conscious uncoupling. Both statistical agencies decided that it made sense to move their own ways, and that's necessitated some changes in the occupational codes. We've got some 300 new occupations added, some 250 occupations retired. And the coming and going of occupations says an awful lot about the Australian labour market. As the Chief Statistician mentioned before, I'm also the Assistant Minister for Employment, and I've long been fascinated by ways in which changes in occupational coding can tell us something about the way jobs are changing. In a 2017 book, Choosing Openness, I looked at the changes from the then Australian Standard Classification of Occupations in 1986 to the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations in 2013. Over that period, from the mid-1980s to the mid-2010s, we saw a set of occupations disappear. Television repairers, complaints clerks, newsboys, public telephone money collectors, railway crossing attendants, lampmen, radio mechanics, tobacco machine attendants, and lighthouse keepers. I'm old enough to remember plenty of people working in those occupations when I was a kid. And then, over that period, you saw the emergence of new jobs: bloggers, baristas, weight loss consultants, aromatherapists, snow groomers, fitness centre managers, lobbyists, disability liaison officers, multimedia artists, life coaches, web developers and sterilisation technicians. So that's just the change that took place from the 1980s to the mid-2010s. But now we can see more change still. I was fortunate enough to see a master list of those occupations that had been removed and those occupations that had been added. And you'll be glad to know that I'm not going to take you through the hundreds of occupations that have gone out and those that have come in. But I do want to take a moment to say something about the kinds of factors that have driven occupations to disappear. There's a set of occupations that have disappeared through which are the forces that I think of broadly as technology and trade. Small offset printers, motion picture projectionists, technical cable jointers, telephone betting clerks, train examiners, footwear factory workers, clothing pattern makers and knitting machine operators. Then there's the occupations that have gone as a result of New Zealand stepping out of the occupational classification. And the occupational classifications no longer include deer farmers, traditional Maori health practitioners or bungee jump masters. And then there's the new jobs that have come in, a set of new jobs related to the net zero economy. We've got EV technicians, bush regenerators, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land and sea rangers. We have a set of occupations related to the growth of the care economy. Music therapists, respiratory or sleep scientists, diabetes educators, family dispute resolution practitioners, dental prosthetists and dog walkers, because we don't just care for human beings. And then there's a set of occupations which relate to technologies. There's cloud architects and cloud engineers. There's digital game developers. There's data architects and data engineers. Now, relevantly to those of you in the room, people at the ABS are both data architects, such as those who design the OSCA classification scheme, and data engineers, such as those who will set about implementing the OSCA classifications. And then there's a set of jobs that are just frankly cool jobs. Coffee roasters, circus performers, netball coaches, martial arts instructors and forensic accountants. The change that we've seen in Australia's occupational classifications does reflect the change that we constantly see in the labour market. One expert described change in the labour market as being like running across ice floes. There's ice that's melting and there's ice that's freezing, and you're staying on top of it. And right now, the Australian labour market is staying on top of it, with 1 million jobs created over the past couple of years, and the unemployment rate now sitting at 4.1%. I want to say too how much I value the way in which the new OSCA classifications support what the Australian government is doing in a range of areas. As we set about addressing the findings of the Royal Commission into aged care quality, we've got changes in the aged care classifications. The existing aged or disability carer occupation has been split into 5 occupations, including aged care team leader, aged care support worker and disability team leader. We've got changes that support the government's national plan to end violence against women and children, which include the existing occupation welfare worker being split into several specialised occupations, including family violence practitioner. And there's changes in OSCA that support the government initiatives to address the Australia-wide workforce shortage in the early childhood education sector, including the existing childcare worker occupation being split into 2 occupations, early childhood education room leader and early childhood educator. There is an extraordinary set of things to be learned from OSCA, and I would encourage those who've never looked through an occupational classification system to take a squiz at it, because these 1,000 or so occupations do tell you a lot about how those of us are spread across the Australian workforce. There is, to be clear, nothing grouchy about OSCA, and it's my pleasure to declare it launched today. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Dr. Gruen. So we're now at part of proceedings where we have some guest speakers, and it's wonderful to have people from outside of the ABS talk about this work. So at the Bureau of Statistics, we often talk about statistical infrastructure, and OSCA is a piece of statistical infrastructure. So it means a lot to us in the Bureau. It means a lot to the way we do our day-to-day jobs. But it's also really important for people outside of the ABS. It's a product which interfaces with policymakers, representatives of industry groups, and a range of other people, including researchers. So I think it's really fitting that we have a number of people who are going to speak to us about their perspectives on what OSCA means. Just to follow on from Dr. Leigh's comments before about this being the Oscars, I actually talked to the team about my role as MC today, and apparently I'm to be classified as an entertainer in my role today, so I think it's absolutely in keeping with your theme. So, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Fan Xiang to the stage today. As I said, she's from Jobs and Skills Australia and has a presentation to share with all of us.
Thanks, Philip. And thanks for the wonderful speech, Dr. Gruen and Dr. Leigh. I think it's still morning, so I'll say good morning, everyone. My name is Fan Xiang, and I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary of National Skills System Branch at Jobs and Skills Australia. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be here today and to present how JSA, or Jobs and Skills Australia, uses ABS, Occupation Classification, or Occupation Taxonomy, and this new OSCA, how it will benefit our work in the future. First of all, a bit background about Jobs and Skills Australia. As some of you know, JSA is a secondary statutory body under the portfolio of employment and workforce relations. And our role is engage, advise, and assist Australian government and our stakeholders in decision-makings on present and future skills and workforce needs for Australian economy. To do this, we conduct high-quality research, data analysis, and policy advice to support a responsive and adaptive workforce. JSA, our work also involves identifying the evolving or emerging demands of the labour market to find opportunities for upskilling and reskilling so that our advice can enhance the economic growth and employment outcomes for all Australians. JSA's vision is for the full skills potential of our nation to be realised and resulting in improved workforce participation, productivity, wages, and equity. And in order to achieve this great vision, we rely heavily on a solid, reliable, and standardised occupation taxonomy, which helps us produce a very accurate picture of Australia's whole labour market. So how does ABS occupation taxonomy fit into our product and our work? Firstly, it's used in our public data offering, such as the occupation shortage list, previously known as the skills priority list, where we identify the occupations in shortage in Australian labour market. Also, the CISO core skills occupation list just released on Tuesday this week. CISO forms, as you know, forms the foundation of the new skills in demand visa. Secondly, the occupation taxonomy is also used in our wide range of workforce analysis reporting and publications. For example, our annual flagship report, the Jobs and Skills Report, released last month, and the Emerging Roles Report, where we identified 37 emerging roles appearing in Australian labour market data for the first time in recent years, or growing rapidly from a small base. In addition, the regional labour market indicators also uses it, and which it gives us a single measure for regional labour market performance. And our capacity studies. These are the in-depth studies focusing on specific sectors relating to government priorities. So far, we have conducted, completed, also published clean energy capacity study and early childhood education and care capacity study. At the moment, we are working on a gender economic equity gender study very closely with Megan's area, Office for Women, and a generative AI capacity study. Last but not least, JSA's 5-yearly or 10-yearly employment projections and some of our other projection work also rely on the occupation taxonomy very heavily. So for all of those products I just mentioned, till today, we've been using ANZSCO from ABS in these years. And now, from today, we have this new OSCA, the Occupation Standard Classification for Australia. With its more refined alignment and assignment of skills and occupations, OSCA will help us better describe our labour market overall. And we can also map the skills and occupations in a more accurate way. In turn, this will lead to, firstly, enhanced relevancy and accuracy in all of our reporting. Based on the new OSCA, our products can better represent the industry standards and the actual workforce landscape. And we can also capture the new roles and specializations in our evolving labour market. Secondly, OSCA will allow for more details and better granularity. I'm sure you will appreciate a more specific occupation classification or taxonomy will help us categorize all the occupations better and capture the nuances in skills requirements and job roles. In addition, OSCA will help our products and our work respond to the labour market trends better. Since industry is always evolving, the new and updated occupations in OSCA will ensure that all of our work always reflects the current, emerging, and even future workforce needs. And finally, as you know, JSA works very closely with our tripartite partners, such as JCs. We saw some colleagues sitting here. So OSCA can help us provide stronger insights for all of our stakeholders and partners. For example, we can better identify and community areas for training, upskilling, and investment. Also better align our stakeholders, including education and training providers, employers, employees, and workforce or policy makers through a more informed labour market knowledge and support a better workforce planning. Now, I just wanted to give you a very quick example about how the new OSCA will help us, our work directly. As Dr. Leigh just mentioned, the way that we work always change. And in our very recent released Emerging Roles report, we've identified 37 emerging roles or new roles appearing in Australia for the first time. And the development in technology have led to increased demand for new skills and new types of jobs in this area. This graph here shows the number of job advertisements in 2022 related to technology. These are solution architect and electric vehicle technician, Dr. Leigh also mentioned. And we found over 8,000 job ads for solution architect and around 2,000 for EV technician. These are really important for anyone who drives the EV here today, although not sure if you've got enough in Canberra. These emerging roles are the jobs becoming more prominent in recent years in our labour market, or they represent a distinct specialisation within an existing occupation. So by integrating these new jobs, these new roles as official occupation in the new OSCA, soon they will be reflected in official statistics from ABS. And for us, JSA, we'll be able to have the opportunity to start studying these new trends for these new occupations. And we can provide our stakeholders a wide range of audience more insights about these trends and these new occupations. So, in summary, based on the new OSCA and higher quality data into the future, we can better reflect the current skills, roles, and qualifications in demand, and identify clearer people's career pathway and in-demand skills. These are all critical and important insights for our national skills system. And as a result, we'll be able to recommend targeted approaches to address policy problems and questions, such as skills shortages in our national priority areas, housing and construction, and others, and which can directly address our community needs and enhance economic resilience and social well-being. And ultimately, this improved alignment will benefit all the players in our economy, because it will ensure that education providers, our training programs, and our workforce policies can better meet the real world requirements and expectations, and will support a more adaptable, capable, and job-ready, also forward-looking workforce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fan. So I'm wondering whether over 7,500 job advertisements for solutions architects, whether that's the threshold that I need to understand what a solutions architect is, because at this point I don't. Thank you. What a wonderful presentation, and it certainly shows how your mission of reaching the full skills potential of Australia is really enhanced by the work that we've done here on OSCA. The partnership has been extremely strong between our organisations, and I think that's a nice lead-in to introduce Megan to the stage from the Office for Women. We've had a strong and ongoing relationship with the Office now for some time. As you'll see today, OSCA is a really important part of that relationship, but only reflects part of what we do. I think the importance of producing data which support the work of the Office for Women is absolutely critical, both in the way we disaggregate information and the way we report it and collect it. But this, I think, example of the way statistical infrastructure helps this work will be a great example. So, Megan, thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Leigh. I'm the First Assistant Secretary, as Philip said, in the Office for Women in the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. I want to start by also acknowledging that we're here on Ngunnawal country and pay my respects. I also want to acknowledge Assistant Minister Leigh and Dr. Gruen, and of course my guest speakers here today, as well as everyone from the ABS who worked on this extraordinary piece of work. It's very, very significant. I know it's been a long long labour of love. The Office for Women was created 50 years ago. We celebrated our 50-year anniversary this year to help advance the government's agenda to build the status of women and, in more recent terms, to improve gender equality. A really important part of the work that we do in doing this is to work with agencies like the ABS to better understand the experience of women, men and gender diverse people in this country, and through data, as well as the experience of different groups of women, men and gender diverse people. In talking about OSCA today, I'm going to sort of talk about the policy implications in terms of the government's broader commitment and vision for gender equality in Australia. So in March this year, Minister Gallagher launched the first national strategy to achieve gender equality, Working for Women. I usually have a copy of this with me everywhere. This is my car copy, and I've got young children, so it's sort of covered in coffee and sunblock and crumbs and things like that. So I suspect the front row might be able to see that, but hopefully it looks pristine from the back. The government's vision for gender equality outlined in here is an Australia where people are safe, treated with respect, have choices and access to resources and equal outcomes no matter their gender. There is absolutely no doubt that a robust evidence base is required to achieve this vision. Data plays a really critical role in shining a light on gender equality and gender inequality in Australia, and providing a better understanding of how policies and programs will have a positive or negative impact on gender equality, particularly through gender responsive budgeting, which has recently been reintroduced, which requires all cabinet submissions and policy proposals to have gender analysis attached to them, and better data means better analysis and better policy. It will also, the data that we have and that is being developed will also really help us to measure the overall impact of working for women year on year, midway through in 5 years' time, and at the end of the strategy, which is in 10 years, where we will hopefully be able to assess immense success of the strategy in its entirety. So how does this relate to OSCA specifically? Two of the ambitions under Working for Women, and there are 5 ambitions in total, but 2 of them are closing the gender pay gap and closing the retirement income gap. The Australian labour market is highly gender segregated, while also facing workforce shortages in many critical industries. We know that occupational and industry segregation is a key driver of the gender pay gap, and we know that this is in part because of the pay disparities between male-dominated sectors and female-dominated sectors, but also pay disparities within those sectors. To help address these shortages and close the gender pay gap, the government has really prioritised improving the number of women in male-dominated industries and increasing the supply of workers in female-dominated industries, particularly the care workforce. And we've seen many, many billions of dollars spent in recent years on improving wages of aged care workers and more recently of the early childhood education sector, which I expect Majella will speak about in more detail next. So the ANZSCO and now OSCA data really helps with shaping these policies and measuring their impact, which is just so critical. We know there's still more work to do though, and we know that better data through the OSCA means better informed, more targeted work, including as the workforce evolves. So I'm going to put a slide's going to come up in a moment, not quite yet. This is the right slide. A slide will come up in a moment after this that looks at sort of the classifications under the ANZSCO and the gender clustering under those classifications, where you sort of saw workforces dominated by men having a great deal more disaggregation than workforces dominated by women. So this evolution through to the OSCA is a really sort of significant improvement. From a care workforce perspective, we will really see the splitting out of the separation of aged care support and disability care support workers, for example, will be very, very, very important. It will help to provide a better understanding of the differences between the sectors, including the workforce segregation and the internal sort of pay gaps that I described before, the workforce drivers such as wages and conditions in attracting and retaining workers, and also better identification of skills shortages. And it will enable better and more accurate workforce planning, better targeted to each sector. And this is the lovely chart there that talks about the sort of how the clustering works worked under ANZSCO, and we're going to see, as I said before, significant improvements under OSCA. So, for example, in some workforces dominated by men, such as machinery operators and drivers, there was a lot of detail in the subgrouping of jobs. So it would go down to jobs such as industrial spray painters. However, for other sectors, as mentioned by the Minister earlier, the workforce supporting victim survivors of gender-based violence, that was categorised under a much higher level of welfare, recreation and community arts workers. This really limited the information about who was in that workforce, their relative qualifications and skills compared across Australia and any shortages. And when we're talking about something like a national crisis around gender-based violence and significant skills and service shortages there, we really need to be able to understand the workforce better. It's fantastic that OSCA includes a new category for the family, domestic and sexual violence workforce that will tell us who is working in these incredibly important jobs: social workers, support workers, legal representatives, those who provide counselling. And that will really sort of go to this ambition that the government has, as some of you may have seen through National Cabinet, and that I think probably we all have, to end gender-based violence, also an ambition under Working for Women. By better understanding this workforce, it will help to inform future policy in this space and just make sure that the people who desperately need this support will be able to get it. So we really want to sort of significantly thank the ABS for working with the Office for Women so closely on this work in the OSCA. I will finally just note what Dr. Gruen said earlier about the removal of gendered language from the OSCA in the transition from ANZSCO to the OSCA. Governments aren't great at driving cultural change. The public service can't go into people's homes, ministers can't go into people's homes and tell them to behave differently or more evenly distribute sort of the division of unpaid care. We can't sort of force women to go into male-dominated industries or men to go into female-dominated industries. But what we can do is we can role model and we can remove signals that suggest that men are better suited for certain jobs and women are better suited for other jobs. So even though it seems like a small language change, we're really, really pleased to see it because we think it's significant. So thank you so much for having me here today, and congratulations on the OSCA.
Thank you, Megan. That was fantastic. I think it is so interesting to reflect on how an update to something, like I said, that's often sort of sounds quite dry, like statistical infrastructure, actually can be an agent for social change. So I think that's a really important point to make. Now, I'd like to welcome our next speaker to the stage today, and it's wonderful to have some representation from outside of government circles. So Majella Fitzsimmons is the President of the Australian Childcare Alliance Queensland branch, and it's wonderful to have her here today to talk about what OSCA means to her and the sector that she represents. So Majella, please come forward.
Thank you. So I represent over 2,500 members, and that's over 4,500 early childhood services. So when we look at that and we look at how many educators we have, that's 75,000 educators that I am representing today. So I think for us, it's a big thank you. Thank you for recognising early childhood. Thank you for acknowledging that it is a profession that needs to be seen as more than just childcare, needs to be seen as educators. and educators that actually teach and educate and care for our children. And those children are going to be the future of our Australian economy. Those children are going to be the ones that lead the way. We do a lot of advocating with government, both nationally, federally and state. We also do a lot of advocating with other peak bodies. We try and make sure that we look at how early childhood can drive policy and procedures, not just for early childhood, but for other parts. So when we're looking at education and schools, when we're looking at health, when we're looking at disabilities, when we're looking at youth justice, we know that it's going to drive policy. So having data is really important that we do that. So while the previous occupation classification provided a framework, it was foundational. We knew that we needed more. We knew that it was very important to have a look at that classification, and we needed to know that we were highlighting the valuable opportunity for improvement. There was a clear need for a more specific classification, and that better represented, we'll throw that page away, represented diversity of occupations within our sector. Furthermore, some role descriptions did not capture the complexities and evolving responsibilities of the modern job. By updating the classification, we can accurately ensure that each role is represented, reflecting the true nature of the work in today's dynamic environment. Now, when we did our submission for ANZSCO, it was so long ago. It feels like so long ago. It wasn't that long ago. But we didn't even come into the play of what the workforce retention grant coming out had that impact. Now, we couldn't have got that retention grant unless we had the data, and that data came from you. So we were very appreciative to be able to say thank you for that data. Great. Data changes policy. Data changes procedures. And without data, you cannot show where the impact is going to have. We look forward to seeing what happens with OSCA in the next 12 months to look at how the wage grant changes and attracts and retrains more educators into early childhood. We know that the introduction of a more accurate specific classification will help ensure the right talented is attracted to the appropriate roles, aligning the candidate's skills and qualifications with the specific demands of the positions available. Now, it was quite interesting seeing the adverts on Seek for jobs in other sectors. Any day you can jump on and you can see for an early childhood worker, an early childhood room leader, an early childhood director, an early childhood teacher is up excess of 8,000 jobs every day on Seek. So that's quite a high, a high demand job. We are always seeking early childhood educators. If you'd like to maybe switch careers, it's very rewarding, just saying. But it's so important that we use language that highlights the early childhood workforce training and experience, as well as clarifying entry-level qualifications and career progression pathways. We can improve and attract diverse candidates and strengthen our workforce by clearly outlining the benefits and opportunities within our sector. The improved classifications would also result in more meaningful, granular data about the early learning workforce, enabling that data to be used more broadly for additional purposes such as that policy and program development. Additionally, the data can be instrumental in informing the development of scholarship investment for professional development and adjustments to the skilled migration policies. So some of the things that I think is really important with that classification is that introduction of room leader compared to educator. We often see room leaders doing a lot more high level of observations, programming for the children, making sure the regulations and the national law are adhered to. They're looking and having those really difficult conversations with families at times when there is some, looking at if there's a disability that may need to be diagnosed, if there's a learning impairment that needs to be diagnosed. And they're doing a lot of mentoring of the educators coming through. Now, we're not going to have an early childhood sector if we don't have those room leaders doing that mentoring with the new educators coming through. So we're very appreciative that we now have that classification. The accurate data resulting from updated classification in the early childhood sector can also better inform our advocacy and policy work, including various workforce strategies across the sector. It can also inform our own organisation's investment in training and development of our member services. So when we're in ACA, we look at how we can support our members better. We look at that data and we say, hey, listen, there's a need for our room leaders to do a little bit more training on programming. There's some areas in our educators that we need to look at what professional development we need to ensure that they're given so that they have all their buckets, and we call them buckets of skills. They have that bucket of skill met so that they can be the best for the children that they care for each and every day. Having a clearer understanding of occupational classification will enable us to advocate for more appropriate funding and resources at both the local and national levels. We may also focus on creating mentorship programs that connect less experienced educators with seasonal professionals, facilitating knowledge transfer and career progression within the sector. Such an important thing, having a mentor, and if you look around in your own careers and where you've gone and how you've gotten to that extra level, you've always had a mentor that's been able to help you. So having that classification now has come through to be able to say, here's a driving force of how we can mentor each other to get to that next level. When we align our organisational strategies with the updated classifications, we can ensure a more effective and responsive approach to workforce development that ultimately benefits our members and the families they serve. Updated classification for our sector's workforce will ultimately lead to better outcomes for families by improving and refining the recruitment process, directed targeted funding where it is most needed, and helping to cultivate a pipeline of experienced and qualified candidates. If we look around in the room today, I'm sure there are a large number of you who have children that have been in early childhood services, and you've seen that transient staff come and go in lots of those services. And that we know that that's not good for children. We know the attachment theory has to happen, and we know that the first 1,000 days of a child's life is so important to make that attachment theory to one or more significant people in their life is going to lead to better outcomes. So by saying that this classification here is going to attract and retain more early childhood educators and moving into that early childhood educators into that room leader, that's going to help the outcomes for our children. By having a clear identifying the various classifications, individual educators will also have a better understanding of their current roles and the steps they need to have advanced to that next level, making it easier to develop personalised plans, career pathways and professional development. Moreover, the more detailed data generated from these classifications will allow us to allocate funding more effectively, directing resources to the areas where they are needed most. Accurate classification will enhance the overall credibility of the early childhood and education and care sector, fostering greater trust and recognition within the community and among stakeholders, which will further strengthen our efforts to improve outcomes in all areas. As I said at the beginning, data informs policy, data informs funding. Without that data, you're not going to be able to have an early childhood sector to say, hey, listen, let's invest in the early childhood sector. Let's invest early. I think there's a saying that's every $1 invested in early childhood saves $3 later on in life. And that data has come from you guys. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I think it's amazing that early childhood has received such a significant improvement in the Australian economy and how important it is. And to be able to have the wage grant that came from the data, to be able to say we're a part of the gender equity case, I think that's all a step forward in the lives of children and the lives of the Australian economy as well. So thank you for today, and I look forward to seeing the results in 12 months' time of how the change has shifted in early childhood.
Majella, thank you very much for that talk. I think the point that you made around so many people in the room and logging online to this will have children or loved ones who've been through the sector, the childcare sector. It really brings home to us how important it is to get our work with OSCA, right? Because it means something to you, so it means something to all of us through the way we interact with the childcare system and a range of other different systems. So I think that was a wonderful perspective to bring, and a very nice one to conclude the guest speakers with. So we've heard about the launch today. That doesn't mean that we're resting on our laurels. We'll continue to work across government and with industry to enhance OSCA, to keep it as relevant as possible. And I think one of the things that we've talked about today has been the deep engagement that the team have done across a range of sectors, and that will continue to be a feature of the work that we do. Excitingly, we'll be doing more work going ahead on a coda for this work, so that we can actually automatically assign occupation classifications based on free text input, for example. So that will be a really important tool that will again be very useful for the research sector, for the government sector, but also for the private sector. So lots of interesting work going ahead. I'd like to finish by again thanking the team for all of the work that they've put into this. I know it's been a tremendous effort to get us where we are. So thank you, team, once again for all of your wonderful work.